ChatGPT said smart people don't chase closure, they choose clarity. It's a quiet, powerful decision that reflects emotional maturity, self-awareness, and the refusal to be controlled by someone else's dysfunction. You see, closure is often romanticized. People imagine it as a final conversation, a moment where everything makes sense, where both parties sit down, exchange apologies, share truths, and walk away with peace. But the truth is, toxic people rarely give closure. Why? Because they feed on confusion. They thrive in emotional chaos. They manipulate facts, rewrite history, and leave doors half open, not because they care, but because they want to maintain control. They want to keep you waiting, hoping, questioning. Smart people recognize this trap early. They understand that chasing closure is like chasing a moving target held by someone who doesn't want you to hit it. It's a cycle of endless texts, long messages that go unanswered. Mental rehearsals of conversations that will never happen. It drains energy. It creates emotional debt. And worst of all, it puts your healing in the hands of the very person who hurt you. So instead, smart people choose clarity, not clarity from the other person, but clarity within themselves. They pause, they process, they journal, they reflect. They ask themselves, what did I experience? What patterns did I ignore? What truth did I silence just to keep peace? And when those answers rise to the surface, they don't run from them. They don't pretend it didn't hurt. They don't minimize it to look strong. They acknowledge the pain. But they also acknowledge the truth. And that truth becomes their closure. This is not about cold detachment. It's not about becoming emotionless or hard-hearted. It's about emotional responsibility. It's about realizing that you cannot extract peace from a person who creates your storms. You cannot find truth in the mouth of a liar. You cannot wait on an apology from someone who sees accountability as a threat to their ego. So you stop waiting. You stop checking their last scene. You stop replaying the argument. You stop expecting the ending to come wrapped in fairness. Clarity is choosing to look at the full picture without the filter of hope. It's being honest about who they were, not who you wanted them to be. It's owning your part without blaming yourself for theirs. It's realizing that not everyone will give you the decency of a goodbye, and that some people will leave your life like a storm, quick, chaotic, and unapologetic. But just because they left without peace doesn't mean you have to stay in pieces. Smart people rebuild, not because the person made it right, but because they made a decision to heal. They reclaim their power by giving themselves what the toxic person never could: honesty, understanding, and resolution. They shift the question from, why did they do this? To what can I learn from this? They stop trying to fix someone else's brokenness and start focusing on their own wholeness. Because ultimately, they know that waiting for closure from a toxic person is like waiting for a thief to return what they stole. It's unlikely. And even if it happens, it won't make up for the damage they caused. Clarity leads to peace because it's rooted in truth, not illusion. It's firm, not fragile. It's yours, not dependent on someone else's timing or willingness. And it's in that clarity that smart people find strength. They learn to say, I don't need an apology to forgive. I don't need an explanation to understand. I don't need a goodbye to let go. That's real growth. And in that growth, they become wiser, stronger, and more grounded. They start choosing people who bring peace, not confusion. They protect their energy. They trust their intuition. They honor their boundaries. And most importantly, they no longer chase anything that demands them to abandon themselves to get it, not even closure. Because the truth is, some chapters don't have an ending, they just have a lesson. And once that lesson is learned, the need for closure dissolves. What remains is clarity. And that clarity becomes the foundation for something far more powerful than any explanation from a toxic person. It becomes freedom. Smart people set boundaries, not battles. It's a quiet strength that often goes unnoticed, misunderstood by the very people who try to violate those boundaries. But make no mistake, setting boundaries is not an act of cruelty or selfishness. It's an act of self-respect, self-awareness, and emotional intelligence. While toxic people often bait others into arguments, guilt trips, or emotional warfare, smart people don't engage in that chaos. They've learned that engaging with people who only want to drain, control, or manipulate is a game with no winner. So instead of fighting, they simply draw a line and they stand by it. A boundary is not a wall, it's a filter. It doesn't block out love, kindness, or understanding. It filters out abuse, manipulation, and emotional poison. Smart people know that constantly reacting to toxic people is exhausting. It's like trying to empty a sinking ship with a spoon. Every time you respond, you're pulled deeper into a dynamic that thrives on your emotional availability. So they stop giving that access. They don't argue with someone who's committed to misunderstanding them. They don't try to explain themselves repeatedly to someone who distorts every word. They simply say, this is what I allow. This is what I don't. You can respect it or you can lose access to me. That kind of calm confidence isn't about ego. It's about energy conservation. Smart people understand that not every conflict needs their time. Not every slight deserves a reaction. Not every disrespect deserves a confrontation. Because sometimes silence is louder than screaming. Sometimes walking away is more powerful than standing and yelling. Toxic people crave attention. They want you to react. They want you to fight. It feeds them. But boundaries starve them. Boundaries say, I'm not available for this kind of interaction. And that in itself becomes a shield. It's not always easy. In fact, it's often hardest with the people closest to you, family, friends, coworkers, even romantic partners. But smart people are willing to be uncomfortable in the short term to protect their peace in the long term. They are not afraid to be seen as mean or cold because they understand that emotional boundaries are not about how others feel about them, but how they feel about themselves. They've learned, often the hard way, that overextending yourself to keep others comfortable only leads to resentment and self-betrayal. When toxic people push back, because they will, smart people don't escalate. They don't match disrespect with disrespect. They don't go to war to prove a point. They stay grounded. They stay calm. They say, I'm not asking you to understand. I'm telling you what I will and won't allow. They refuse to shrink themselves to fit into relationships that demand silence in place of honesty or chaos in place of calm. Setting boundaries isn't just about saying no. It's about honoring your yes. It's about choosing where your time, energy, and love goes. It's about deciding who gets to be close to you and who doesn't. Smart people don't try to change toxic people. They accept who people are, and then they act accordingly. They say, you can be who you are, but that doesn't mean I have to keep you in my life. They understand that peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the presence of healthy space. One of the most powerful things a person can do is to stop explaining themselves to people who are committed to misunderstanding them. That's what boundaries do. They end the cycle. They cut the emotional leash. And once those boundaries are in place, something powerful happens. Clarity. Suddenly, you can see who respects you and who only tolerated you when you were easy to manipulate. You can see who shows up when you're no longer easy to use. And that clarity will hurt, but it will also free you. So smart people don't fight toxic people. They outgrow them. They don't scream for respect. They move in silence and command it. They don't need to win arguments because they've already won the most important battle, the one within themselves. They've chosen peace over performance, clarity over confusion, power over people pleasing. And in doing so, they teach each others without saying a word that their time, energy, and heart are not up for grabs. They are reserved for those who know how to treat them right. Because in the end, smart people don't waste time proving their worth to those who refuse to see it. They set a boundary and they keep walking. Smart people respond. They don't react. There's a subtle but powerful difference between those two actions, and understanding it can transform not just your relationships, but your entire life. Reacting is impulsive. It's emotional. It comes from a place of defensiveness, fear, anger, or insecurity. It's automatic. It's the sharp comeback, the angry text, the loud argument, the sarcastic jab. It feels good in the moment, like you're standing up for yourself, like you're not letting someone walk over you. But afterward, there's usually regret, a feeling that maybe you gave them too much power, that you stooped to their level, that you acted before you truly thought it through. Smart people don't let their emotions drive the wheel. They don't give other people the remote control to their behavior. Instead, they pause. They take a breath. They create space between the stimulus and the response. That space is everything. It's where wisdom lives. It's where maturity kicks in. It's the difference between escalating a situation and diffusing it. It's the moment where they ask themselves, what's really going on here? Because smart people know that not everything deserves a reaction, and not everyone deserves access to your peace. When someone says something rude, a reactive person fires back with something worse. A smart person sees the insult for what it is, a reflection of the other person's inner conflict, not theirs. When someone tries to provoke guilt, trip, or manipulate, a reactive person gets pulled into the game. A smart person sees the strings and refuses to play. They understand that composure is strength, that restraint is power. They're not passive, they're in control. They're choosing their battles with care. They know that reacting gives away power. Responding reclaims it. This doesn't mean smart people suppress their emotions. It means they regulate them. They feel everything, but they filter before expressing. They ask themselves, is this worth my energy? Is this true to who I am? Will this help or hurt the situation? That internal check-in creates a delay, and in that delay, clarity appears. Sometimes it means walking away instead of arguing. Sometimes it means saying nothing instead of defending yourself to someone who's already made up their mind. Sometimes it means responding with a calm truth instead of a loud defense. One of the key reasons smart people respond instead of react is that they are anchored in self-awareness. They've done the work to understand their triggers. They know what gets under their skin, and more importantly, why. They don't blame others for making them angry. They take responsibility for their emotions. That awareness is their armor. It allows them to observe a situation without becoming it. They can sit in discomfort without needing to lash out. They don't need to win every argument. They don't need to be right all the time. They're more focused on preserving peace than proving a point. In fact, when someone tries to provoke them, their lack of reaction becomes unsettling for the other person. Because toxic people feed off drama. They want to see you lose control. They want to see you emotional. It confirms their power. But when you remain calm, when you choose your words slowly, when you don't give them the performance they're seeking, you take that power away. You stay rooted. You stay grounded. You let their chaos swirl around you without stepping into the storm. Responding instead of reacting also builds trust within yourself and with others. People begin to see you as stable, as someone who doesn't get easily rattled. You become the one who diffuses tension in a room, not adds to it. Your calm becomes contagious. Your words carry more weight because they're not driven by impulse. They're guided by intention. And over time, this becomes your reputation. You're the one who doesn't panic under pressure, the one who thinks before speaking, the one who listens then speaks with purpose. This kind of inner discipline isn't always easy, especially in a world that encourages instant expression, public responses, and emotional outbursts. But smart people play the long game. They know that temporary silence often speaks louder than temporary satisfaction. That one calm response can end a cycle of drama. That not reacting is sometimes the most powerful response there is. So they train themselves. They pause. They reflect. They stay composed in moments that used to unravel them. Not because they don't care, but because they care too much about protecting their energy, their dignity, and their direction in life. Because at the end of the day, how you respond in pressure-filled moments says more about you than the pressure itself. And smart people choose to let their responses reflect their wisdom, not their wounds. Smart people replace toxicity with purpose. They don't just walk away from toxic people, environments, or habits. They intentionally fill the space that was once occupied by chaos with something meaningful. That's the key. It's not just about cutting out what's harmful. It's about choosing what's healing, what's growth-focused, what's aligned with their deeper values. Because smart people know that simply removing a problem isn't enough. If you don't replace the void, the same patterns, people, and pain tend to return, just in different forms. So instead of leaving life empty after cutting off toxicity, they rebuild it with intention. When smart people let go of toxic relationships, they don't spiral into bitterness or revenge. They don't dwell on who was right or wrong. They reflect, yes, but then they redirect. They shift their focus from what hurt them to what helps them grow. Instead of wasting time ruminating on someone's betrayal, they pour that time into building something of value. Maybe it's a new project, a passion, a purpose, a deeper spiritual life, or a healthier community. Whatever it is, it gives their life a new direction, one that doesn't include chaos as a guest. They understand that toxic people are distractions. They keep you locked in cycles of emotional highs and lows, consuming your energy, creativity, and focus. And once that drain is removed, what's left behind is clarity, a rare and powerful state. In that clarity, smart people begin to see where they were shrinking, overgiving, and self-abandoning. They begin to ask better questions. What matters to me now? What am I here to create? What can I build in this season of my life that will still matter years from now? This is how purpose takes root. Purpose isn't always a grand vision or life mission. It starts small. It starts with showing up for yourself consistently. It's the shift from how do I make them happy to how do I honor myself. It's the moment you realize that you don't need to live in reaction to someone else's dysfunction. You can live in response to your own values. That's the quiet revolution of a smart person's healing journey. They stop obsessing over being understood by toxic people and start building lives that make sense to their soul. And here's the beautiful part. Purpose heals what toxicity breaks. Where there was once confusion, purpose brings clarity. Where there was emotional exhaustion, purpose brings energized focus. Where there was low self-worth, purpose reminds you that you were never meant to settle for less than you deserve. It gives the pain a place to go. It transforms wounds into wisdom and bitterness into direction. It doesn't mean you forget what happened. It means you stop letting it define you. This mindset also changes how smart people move forward. They don't go looking for more battles to fight. They're not interested in proving themselves or winning petty games. They've got something better to do. They've got goals to reach, people to uplift, visions to manifest. They know what it feels like to be drained and distracted, and they're not willing to go back. That sense of purpose becomes their protection. It's a filter. If something or someone doesn't align with that purpose, it doesn't get access. It's not about hate, it's about direction. This also shifts the energy they bring into relationships. Instead of desperation or codependency, they show up with clarity and boundaries. Instead of needing validation, they offer stability. And because they've replaced toxicity with purpose, they're not easily shaken by rejection or manipulation. They know that walking away from drama isn't loss, it's alignment. The most empowering thing about this transformation is that it's entirely in your control. You may not have chosen the toxic situation, but you can absolutely choose what comes after it. And when smart people make that choice, they don't wait for someone else to fix them or validate their healing. They take responsibility. They become the architects of their own peace. And in doing so, they stop living in reaction to their past and start creating a future that's rooted in purpose. Because at the end of the day, removing toxic people is just the beginning. What you replace them with, that's what shapes your life. And smart people, they fill that space with meaning, with goals, with service, with love, with vision. They don't just survive toxicity, they outgrow it. They turn it into fuel, and they use that fuel to rise.